Every morning is a blank canvas, a sacred moment when the world hasn't yet spoken over your soul, and before the noise of doubt, distraction, and fear takes over, you have one priceless opportunity to remind yourself who you truly are. Before your phone lights up, before your responsibilities weigh you down, there's a quiet truth waiting to be claimed. In that stillness, say this to yourself: today, I am the cause, not the effect. This is the most powerful thing you can tell yourself, because it flips your entire mindset from passive reaction to purposeful creation. You are not here to be at the mercy of circumstance or emotion. You are the origin of energy, action, and outcome. Life doesn't just happen to you, it happens through you. When you begin your day with this truth, you shift from being a follower of moods and situations to being a leader of vision, discipline, and intention. You're not waiting for the world to give you a sign. You become the sign. Let this declaration rise like the sun within you, reminding your spirit that you are the source. My presence is my power. In a world constantly pushing us to prove our value through noise, numbers, hustle, and motion, we've forgotten the ancient power of stillness, the sacred fire of presence, and the truth that you don't need to chase anything when you are everything. My presence is my power. It's not just a phrase. It is a declaration, a spiritual blueprint, and a daily reminder that before you do, before you say, before you even move, who you are, fully alive, fully conscious, fully anchored in the moment, is your greatest strength. In a time when the world is addicted to speed, distracted by screens, and lost in comparison, presence becomes a revolutionary act. Your presence means showing up with your entire self, undivided, undistracted, undiminished. It's not about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the most aligned. It's about carrying yourself with the kind of quiet dignity that doesn't demand attention, but naturally draws it. Because people can feel when someone is rooted in truth, not ego, in awareness, not anxiety, in vision, not validation. Presence is not about doing more. It's about being here, fully, honestly, fearlessly. When you walk into a room knowing you don't need to impress anyone, because you're already impressed by who you've become and who you're becoming, you shift the energy without even trying. You become a living reminder of what peace looks like in motion. You don't have to announce your worth when your spirit radiates it. You don't have to demand respect when your energy naturally commands it. You don't have to speak first to be remembered. You just have to be present enough to let your stillness speak volumes. Because presence is felt in the pauses, in the eye contact, in the breath before the answer, in the way your feet touch the ground like roots and your heart beats like a drum that keeps the rhythm of your soul. The people who are truly powerful aren't always the ones speaking. They are the ones whose very existence becomes a standard of truth. You know them when they enter a room, calm, collected, clear. They don't flinch, rush, or shrink. They listen more than they speak because they are not desperate to be seen. They already see themselves. Their presence says, I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to be it. That is the power you carry when you stop fragmenting yourself for approval. When you stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-performing. That's the power you awaken when you choose to stop being everywhere and start being here. You become intentional with your gaze, purposeful with your voice, conscious with your silence. And this kind of presence doesn't just transform how others see you, it transforms how you see the world. When you are present, you don't miss life. You feel the wind. You taste the moment. You hear the heartbeat beneath the noise. You become aware of the patterns in your thoughts, the posture of your body, the tone in your words. You notice what feeds your energy and what drains it. You stop being a stranger to yourself. And from this inner stillness, you begin to access a deeper intelligence, the kind that doesn't rush to react, but instead chooses to respond. Presence turns you into a master of space, time, and energy. You begin to realize that your greatest power isn't what you do in the spotlight. It's how you hold yourself in the shadows. It's how you treat the small moments the silent pauses, the unseen battles. It's how you breathe when things fall apart. It's how you stand when no one's watching. Your presence becomes medicine for yourself and for others, because people are starved for realness in a world of filters and facades. When you are present, you're not just existing, you're embodying. You're not just hearing, you're listening. You're not just looking, you're seeing. You're not just reacting, you're responding from power, not panic. You begin to trust your intuition more than your insecurities. You stop living in your head and start living from your core. You realize that being present isn't a passive state, it's the most active form of power. It means your mind isn't wandering, your spirit isn't disconnected, and your energy isn't leaking into past regrets or future worries. You are whole. And when you live from this wholeness, everything around you begins to shift. People respect you differently. You attract conversations that matter. You stop getting drained by meaningless drama because your presence no longer entertains it. You stop chasing relationships that don't value you because your presence is no longer available to spaces that dim your light. You begin to magnetize opportunities, not because you chase them, but because you've become too aligned to be ignored. And you must understand, this presence is not a performance. It's not about pretending to be poised or practicing mindfulness as a trend. This is sacred work. This is inner alignment. This is a return to your natural state, where your soul is fully awake in your body, your thoughts are in harmony with your truth, and your actions reflect your deepest values. You don't need to become someone else to be powerful. You need to return to yourself. Your breath is your anchor. Your awareness is your superpower. Your authenticity is your weapon. When you stop trying to be everywhere for everyone and instead choose to be right here for yourself, everything changes. The chaos loses its grip. The noise fades into the background. You stop looking for power outside of yourself and realize it's been inside you all along, waiting for you to slow down enough, be quiet enough, be still enough to feel it rise. And as it rises, you stop reacting to every storm because you've become the calm. You stop chasing the spotlight because you've become the sun. You don't need external permission to feel worthy because you've given it to yourself. And from this space, you live differently. You speak with clarity. You move with purpose. You love without fear. You lead without force. You shine without apology. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more presence. It needs more people who are here. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, before the world tries to define you again, before the anxiety creeps in, before the self-doubt whispers its lies, stand still for a moment, put your hand on your heart, and remind yourself, my presence is my power. Not because of what you have, not because of what you do, but because of who you are when you fully show up. That is the foundation, that is the message, that is the truth. And when you live from that truth, there is no room for pretending, performing, or proving. Because you are the proof. Your life becomes the message, your breath becomes a prayer, and your presence becomes a force that the world cannot ignore. I want to share with you 4 real life-changing motivational stories, so please listen with an open heart and full attention. If these words inspire you even a little, then I humbly ask you to share this message with your friends and family, not for my fame, but so that they too can awaken something powerful within themselves, so they can rise, grow, and become a light, not only for their own lives, but for society, for this nation, and for the world. When one person transforms, it creates a ripple. Let's be that ripple together. Let this message not just be heard, let it be felt. There was a time not long ago when a man named Arun found himself standing in front of a mirror each morning and not recognizing the person looking back at him. Not because his face had changed, but because his spirit had. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, working 14-hour days, striving for promotions, accolades, and the kind of external success that people applaud, thinking it would lead to fulfillment. On paper, Arun was impressive. Ivy League graduate, regional director of a global tech firm, owner of a sleek apartment in a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows, but on the inside he was hollowed out. He couldn't explain why, but every wind felt emptier than the last, and every morning felt heavier. His body was present, but his soul felt absent, like he was living someone else's life. One day, while preparing for a high-stakes meeting, he had a panic attack in the elevator. He fell to the floor, gasping, shaking, and sweating as the elevator climbed 27 floors. That was the moment something broke open inside him, not just his body's tolerance for stress, but the illusion that what he had built would sustain him. After that, he started questioning everything. Why was he running so hard? Who was he trying to impress? And most importantly, when was the last time he felt truly here, alive, grounded, whole? The answer terrified him. He couldn't remember. At the suggestion of a colleague, he reluctantly signed up for a silent meditation retreat in the mountains of Himachal Pradesh. No phones, no laptops, no emails, just 10 days of stillness. On the first day, he almost quit. The silence was deafening and the stillness felt like punishment. His thoughts screamed louder than city traffic. His muscles twitched from the absence of movement, and his identity, the one built on speed, titles, and accomplishment, felt like it was being dismantled. But slowly, something inside him began to shift. He started noticing the rhythm of his breath, the tension in his shoulders, the constant chatter in his head. He realized how long he had been operating from a place of absence, always a few steps ahead of the moment, planning, predicting, performing. On the third day, during a walking meditation, he stopped under a pine tree, placed his hand on its bark, and for the first time in years felt completely present. He could feel the texture of the tree, the breeze on his skin, the weight of his own body. Tears welled up, not from sadness, but from the shock of rediscovery. This is what it feels like to be here, he thought, and that was the seed of transformation. He began to understand that presence is not a luxury, it is a necessity. He saw how much of his life had been lived in reaction, reacting to deadlines, to demands, to expectations, but not from truth, not from alignment. Presence wasn't about slowing down to escape life, it was about becoming fully engaged with it. By day 6, something astonishing happened. During a group sit in the main hall, as 70 people sat in total silence, Arun felt an invisible shift in the room. He couldn't explain it, but it was as though someone's energy had entered with such clarity and calm that it altered the entire vibration. He opened his eyes briefly, and across the room, a monk had just entered. He walked in barefoot, silently, slowly, with his eyes cast downward, hands folded. He didn't say a word, but everyone noticed. Arun later asked one of the instructors about him, and she said, "That's Bhante. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, people listen, not because he raises his voice, but because he doesn't need to. His presence is his power." That sentence never left Arun. After the retreat, he returned home, a changed man. Not in some dramatic, mystical way, but in a subtle, grounded way that only those close to him noticed. His wife said his eyes had softened. His assistant said his energy calmed the room. His friends said he seemed lighter. But the biggest change was internal. He no longer chased power in the form of control, dominance, or accolades. He found it in presence. He began each morning with 15 minutes of stillness, not as a productivity hack, but as a devotion. He started listening, really listening, to people without rehearsing his responses in his mind. He began to walk slower, breathe deeper, speak less but mean more. In meetings, he found that his silence often carried more authority than his arguments. When he made eye contact, it was steady, not performative. His employees began mirroring his calm. Tensions in his team began to dissolve. Performance improved, not because of pressure, but because people felt seen. He had stopped multitasking during conversations and started showing up fully. He didn't need to prove himself anymore because he had found himself. One day a younger colleague came to him and asked, "How do you lead without force?" Arun smiled and said, "Because I don't lead with volume, I lead with presence. And when you're fully here, people feel safe. And when people feel safe, they trust. And when they trust, they rise." But Arun's greatest test came 6 months later, when his father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The old version of him would have buried himself in work or spiraled into fear. But now he chose to be present. He sat with his father for hours, not distracting him with hopeful talk or pretending to fix things, but simply being there, holding his hand, breathing with him, witnessing his pain without turning away. His father once whispered, "You're not saying much these days, son, but I've never felt closer to you." That moment broke him open. He realized that presence is the purest form of love. No words, no fixing, just being. When his father passed, Arun grieved deeply, but he grieved with dignity, with clarity, with presence. No regrets. He had shown up. And that made all the difference. From that point on, Arun became a different kind of leader, not just in his company, but in his community. He gave talks not about strategy, but about stillness. He mentored not by giving advice, but by listening. People were drawn to him, not for what he had accomplished, but for how he made them feel. They said his presence was healing. He no longer walked into rooms to be the most important person. He walked in to see the most invisible person, and that became his power. He became a reminder in a busy world that you don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be flashy to be remembered, and you don't have to control everything to have impact. You just have to be present. And presence is not passive. It's courage. It means facing the discomfort of silence. It means being honest in conversations. It means slowing down when the world tells you to speed up. It means putting down your phone and lifting your eyes. It means owning your breath, your boundaries, your being. Years later, Arun would say in a keynote speech to young leaders, "Your resume might get you in the room, but your presence is what will make people lean in. Don't just be around, be here. Let your stillness be louder than your ambition." And when he closed his eyes at night, he no longer counted accomplishments. He counted the moments he was fully alive, the walks without phones, the deep belly laughs with his daughter, the unfiltered tears with his mother, the sacred silences beside his wife, the soft breath of presence that held him when life didn't make sense. That was his wealth. That was his legacy. That was his real power, because he had learned through burnout, breakdown, stillness, silence, and sorrow that at the center of all impact is presence. Not performance, not perfection, presence. And every morning he still reminded himself, just as he did under that pine tree in the Himalayas, "My presence is my power." Story number 2. A mother reclaims herself through presence. There was a woman named Lena, once known as the brightest girl in her town, who grew up with dreams as high as the Himalayas, wanting to be a writer, a traveler, a creator of beautiful things. But as life unfolded, marriage, motherhood, and duty wrapped themselves around her like vines, not in bitterness but in quiet erosion, until one day she realized she hadn't heard her own voice in years. She had 2 beautiful sons, a husband who worked tirelessly, and a home that was always in motion. But somewhere in the noise of lunchboxes, parent-teacher meetings, laundry cycles, and late-night dishes, her presence was traded for performance. Always doing, fixing, serving, but rarely being. One morning she dropped a cup while washing dishes and burst into tears, not because of the cup, but because it was the first moment her body screamed, "I am here, but I'm gone." That day, her youngest son, just 9 years old, hugged her and said, "Mom, I miss you. You're here, but it's like you're not." That simple sentence cracked something inside her. She decided to begin again, not by running away, not by burning her life down, but by slowly, deliberately reclaiming her presence. She began waking up 30 minutes earlier, not to do more, but to be more. She would sit on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, sipping chai, breathing deeply, watching the birds. The silence scared her at first, because it brought back the longing she had buried. But eventually, it became sacred. She started writing again, not novels, just thoughts, memories, gratitude. Slowly, her days shifted. Instead of rushing to get everything done, she started showing up with her whole self. She looked into her children's eyes when they spoke. She hugged them longer. She listened without interrupting, and something began to transform, not just in her, but in her home. Her children grew calmer. Her husband noticed the difference, saying one night, "There's peace in you now, and it's in the house too." But Lena's real awakening happened when her father fell ill. She spent 2 weeks by his bedside in the hospital, and instead of filling the silence with small talk or worry, she simply sat with him, held his hand, sang the songs he used to sing to her as a child. He whispered once, "You always had this quiet light in you. It's back." She wept, not from grief, but from return. She realized her power was never in how much she did, how much she sacrificed, or how hard she worked, but in how fully she showed up. Presence wasn't passive, it was transformative. She began teaching small writing workshops for women in her neighborhood, not for fame or income, but to help others return to themselves. And in each circle, as women cried, laughed, and shared truths long silenced, they would say the same thing Lena had once forgotten. "I've been missing from my own life." And Lena would smile and say, "Then come back. Your presence is your power." She had no platform, no titles, no viral fame. But when she walked into a room, people felt something soften, because she had stopped performing and started being. Her power was not loud, but it was undeniable. And every day, she reminded herself gently, "My presence is my power." Story number 3. A soldier finds stillness after war. Derek served 3 tours overseas, a highly decorated Marine with a reputation for discipline, grit, and leadership under pressure. But when he returned home at 34, the battlefield didn't stay behind. It followed him into every quiet room, every dream, every flash of unexpected noise. His wife barely recognized him. His son, just 6 years old, would flinch when he raised his voice in frustration. Derek wasn't violent, he was just absent, emotionally unplugged, physically present, but mentally lost in a world that no longer fit. Therapy helped, medication numbed, but nothing touched the hollow ache inside his chest until one evening, sitting on the porch alone, he watched his son fall while learning to ride a bike. Normally, Derek would have shouted, "You're fine, get up." But this time, something stopped him. His son looked up, scared and hurt, and instead of reacting, Derek walked over slowly, knelt, looked him in the eye, and said nothing. He just held his shoulders, let the boy cry, and waited. After a minute, his son stopped, looked into his father's eyes, and said, "You're different, Dad. You're not mad." That one moment was the first time Derek felt the power of being there without fixing, commanding, or retreating. He began to study presence, not as a trend but as survival. He started practicing breathwork taught by a former Navy SEAL who'd become a monk. It was awkward at first, but soon Derek felt something shift. Inhale, hold, exhale. It was a rhythm of coming home. He started sitting quietly before breakfast. Started listening to his wife's voice without judging himself. Started noticing how his hands trembled less when his mind was calm. Over months, his presence returned, not just to his family, but to himself. He found he could walk into chaotic situations and stay grounded, not because of brute force, but because of inner stillness. He volunteered at a center for troubled youth, and without trying to be wise or heroic, he would just sit with the boys. letting them talk or say nothing. They trusted him, not because he had stories of war, but because he was safe to be around. His presence was steady, calm, and non-judgmental. He began mentoring younger veterans, teaching them not how to fight, but how to breathe. He said, "What kept me alive on the battlefield was training. What's keeping me alive now is presence." Eventually, he and his wife started hosting backyard circles for military families. No formal structure, just real talk and silence when needed. One night, after sitting quietly with a young soldier battling anxiety, the man said, "You didn't say much, but I feel like I've been seen for the first time." And Derek smiled, remembering his son's eyes, and said, "That's because I'm finally here." His story spread, not because of his war record, but because people felt safe around him. He had become a lighthouse, not loud, but constant, not pushy, but unwavering. And the more he lived from presence, the more peace he carried. For him, "My presence is my power" wasn't a mantra. It was redemption, recovery, and a second chance at life. Story number 4. An artist finds his voice in silence. Nico was once the rising star of the underground art world in Barcelona, young, bold, rebellious, and acclaimed for his politically charged murals and chaotic canvases that seemed to scream from the walls. But after his first gallery tour in Berlin turned into a commercial circus, he felt himself drifting into a version of art that pleased the world but betrayed his soul. He stopped painting, just vanished. Moved back to a small village in the Pyrenees where his grandparents once lived, bought an old cottage with crumbling walls, and decided to live off the grid. No announcements, no dramatic goodbyes, just silence. For months, he didn't create. He just lived, chopped wood, tended a garden, cooked meals from scratch, watched the sun rise like a child. The locals thought he was strange, a city boy turned hermit, but slowly they began to wave, then share stories, then bring bread. Nico, for the first time in his life, started learning the